Welcome to the 70th episode of Retrotopia. My name is Brian, and today I'm going in the world of robots and humanity as I talk about the PlayStation 1 classic role-playing game, Xenogears. Now, if you're here for the chat, go about 15 minutes down the road, but we really hope you stay and listen to our intros because we have a lot of fun doing them, and we really appreciate when people, take the time to listen. But before we get into all that, I gotta talk about our social medias. If you want to find us on our Twitter, our Instagram, our YouTube, or join our Discord with our ever-growing community, you can find all those links at linktree/Retrotopia. That's linktr.ee/Retrotopia. You can also support us further by joining our Patreon, which is free. And in the free tier, you get 2 more shows, including Quick Play, which is a single-host quick review of a game that we really felt we couldn't make a full episode out of, or members of our hero tier, which is $2 a month, get to pick a game and the host that gets to review that game on Quick Play. We also have Retro Bites, where you get the show 15 days early or the middle of the month, and we add an extra bonus topic for the Patreon themselves. You'll also be able to suggest topics for polls, which we run approximately every quarter of the year. And you can vote on said polls, as well as comment on the games we talk about, like today's game, Xenogears. Also, you can write into the host on the 9-bit banter box for the intro, because it's culturally elegant. And today's first comment comes from Mr. Hooley, who says, Brian, beyond video games, what are some of your favorite hobbies? Besides drinking delicious beer. Well, I've been cutting back on the beer. Let's start with that one. It was getting too much of a problem. I was drinking way too much. So since Christmas, I've cut down. I've had about less than 10 beers in the last 2 months, which is pretty good for me, if you knew me. For hobbies outside of video games, I moved around a lot, both as a kid and as an adult. It kind of really killed some of the hobbies I did. Like, when I was young, I used to play outside a lot, do street hockey, go through the woods, all the stuff kids would do back in the day when, you were allowed to be outside without some old lady calling child services. As an adult, I used to play hockey, old people hockey, I guess you could call it. I played with my unit in the military for a while, then I got posted around, and the rinks were about 40-minute drive away, and all the games were at 11 o'clock at night, and I had to work at 5 in the morning, so that was like a big no-go for me. I would like to get back into playing hockey. I've been looking into it. This year wasn't good for me, but hopefully next year will be. There's also going for walks in the spring and the summer. Right now we have so much snow that the piles on the side of the road are about 7 to 8 feet tall. I'm not walking in that, and recently I had to kind of wade through some knee-deep snow, and it's given me a bit of a chest cold, so I've been working through that. But in the summer, I do like to walk a lot. I do love hot weather. I don't know why, but going for a walk when it's 30 degrees out, it's very relaxing to me. Mostly because I only need to take 3 steps before I start sweating, and I feel like I've done all this effort. And also, of course, a hobby would be world domination, but we'll get into that in a future episode. If you keep hearing cuts as I'm talking, that's because I'm pausing to cough. I apologize for that. But also things I currently like doing, like right now, I do like smoking meats and cheeses and stuff like that. I got a Bradley electric smoker just to kind of cheat a little bit. I got a cold smoking box for cheeses. I also have a charcoal barbecue, which I use to smoke, and a pellet smoker, so I smoke a lot of meat. Giggity. Also, another thing I'm going to start doing is try to learn to draw better. I'm taking classes right now that teach you the human form, the musculature, and all that kind of stuff you need to draw. But it takes practice, and I really need to get back into it. I got a tablet with a pen, so I have no excuse not to, and I'm going to start using that more often to draw a little bit better and a little more often. So thanks, Hooley. Hopefully that answered your question, and I'm going to move on now to Blaine the Hoagie Man from the Retro Riders podcast. He says, what's a game franchise that you want to stay gone? It's been dead for decades or so, but you hope it never comes back. I had to think about this one before I recorded. I'm gonna go with F-Zero. Uh, it was fun for a minute, but honestly, the game's not that good. It is just not as good as people say it is. It used Mode 7 graphics. The handling was terrible. The future games were like blips on the radar. This F-Zero 99, came and went so fast. Time to let that franchise just die. It's over. It's gone. It's done. We got Falcon, or Captain Falcon, out of it for Smash Brothers. That's probably the best part of the entire, legacy of this franchise right there. And as a bonus, I'll also get rid of the Knights of the Old Republic franchise, and that's just to make Sam and Ellen cry, because I am meaner than I pretend to be. Thanks, Blaine. Moving on to the big deal for our last question. The big deal asks, as I'm a new listener that wants to learn more about the hosts, I'm curious to know what each of your gaming nostalgia... let me restart that. I'm curious to know what each of you have gaming nostalgia for. Brian, what hits you right in the member berries? I've said this many times on the show, Chrono Trigger would be my favorite game of all time. I can play that game countless amount of times and never get bored with it. Just a great overall RPG, but for nostalgia... Overall, I go for mostly 8-bit or 16-bit games. Even in modern titles, the 8-bit, 16-bit graphic aesthetic is very calming to me. Even though the games generally tend to be a little bit harder, it just brings me back to my childhood. And most of all, it brings me back to that time when we used to have sleepovers and everybody would bring their gray case of Nintendo games. And we would just go through, take turns. You had chips, you had pops, sleeping bags rolled out on the floor, one TV. You'd all fight each other, taking turns, Loser moves on, winner carries on. Those are great times. Also, I didn't pay taxes back then, so, better times overall. So that's all of our questions. Thank you to everybody who wrote in again. I always appreciate it. Remember, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, just jump on our Patreon for free, and you can. So with that, what have I been playing? Well, I've been playing Wild Arms. I finished that. Fantastic game. Did not remember the ending at all, so it was kind of like playing a game I finished before that was new again somehow. It was great. Forgot how good that game was. I do have Alter Code F, which is the one I tend to lean on if I do replay that game, so playing the original was quite nice. Game holds up. I also started Legend of Zelda Link Between Worlds on the 3DS. I almost left my 3DS in a restaurant when I hopped on a bus, and I had to jump off the bus and run a 1.5K back through the knee-deep snow to make sure I could secure my 3DS, also all my schoolwork and my laptop and stuff like that. That was not a good night. And it's also led me to this chest congestion right now. But yeah, I started playing that, and I'm loving it. I'm loving every minute of it. And of course, I'm playing Kirby 64 because it won the latest Patreon poll, so we're going to be reviewing that next week. The boys have already started it. I'm about halfway through. Not going to give away my thoughts, but I'm not a huge Kirby fan to begin with, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to let you mull over that. Do I like it? Don't I? Have I turned around? All these questions and more next week. So, that's everything I've been up to, everything I've been playing. My life is quite boring. Before I'm recording this, before I have to go for my programming test, so I'm kind of internally freaking out over that. Other than that, nothing going on. So we're going to move on. And before we go any further, I always love this part because we give the floor to Alan so we can enjoy his sweet British voice on what we call the Gentleman's Interlude.
Ah, Xenogears, my dear fellow. What an exquisite and tragically underappreciated gem of the gaming world. This fine work of art, released on the PlayStation 1, hails from the fine minds at Squaresoft, now Square Enix, and was first unleashed upon the gaming populace in Japan on the 11th of February 1998. The North American shores were graced with this monumental creation on the 20th October, while the European masses would have to wait indefinitely. But what, you might ask, makes this game such a marvel? It is a role-playing game of extraordinary depth, my good friend, both in its narrative and its mechanics. The plot, rich with philosophical musings, religious allegory, and psychological intrigue, follows a young man named Fei Fong Wong. Our intrepid hero embarks on a grand adventure through a dystopian world fraught with conspiracy, war, and unrelenting conflict, all whilst the very nature of his existence remain in question. The tale interweaves themes of identity, free will, and the eternal battle between good and evil. Quite riveting, I must say. The developer, Squaresoft, known for their unparalleled prowess in crafting role-playing epics, entrusted this noble creation to the hands of Tetsuya Takahashi, whose brilliance shines through in both the direction and storytelling. Takahashi, alongside his talented team, ensured that Xenogears was not merely a game but an experience to be savoured, featuring a masterful blend of turn-based combat and the infamous gear battles, where large mechs, or gears if you will, engage in pitched battles that hark back to the glory of mecha anime. It is of no small note that Xenogears presents itself with a rather unorthodox approach to game design. While its narrative is labyrinthine and at times inscrutable, it rewards the most diligent of players with a world that feels vast and intricately connected. One might almost say that it is a game of grand ambition, one that pushes the limits of what was expected of games in the late 90s. Unfortunately, dear listener, this magnificent tale is forever marked by its unfinished state, owing to time constraints and the scale of the vision, which leaves the game's narrative somewhat fragmented. Nevertheless, it remains a work of unparalleled influence in the world of RPGs, and a fine example of Squaresoft's unmatched artistry during its heyday. A truly splendid affair.
As always, thank you very much, Alan. And now, before I get into the game, which again, this is my first solo attempt at doing an episode, so I hope you enjoy it. We do have a comment from one of our listeners, and that is from Super Dave, who is starting up a podcast called the Anime Field Guide. Keep your eyes out for that. He sent me a little clip. Sounds fantastic. He has a great voice for podcasting. Probably a great face for it too. Hey-oh. Anyways, Super Dave says, in the third person, Dave advises his fellow gamers to save, and save again. That is good advice. I've gotten stuck in dungeons multiple times with no backup and had to grind out new combos in order to progress. If I ever get past the first 15 hours of this game, it'll be an achievement. Yeah, this game took me 60 hours to complete. 15 hours is the introduction. Alright, that's it. That's all the comments we had. Thanks, Super Dave. So, with a little bit of music here, I'm going to transition into my first solo effort, like I keep saying, of Xenogears. I really hope you enjoy it. So, today I am going to be talking about Xenogears, developed by Square Production Development Division 3, who later became Monolith Studios, apparently. Published by Square Electronic Arts, remember when that happened in life? And it was released on the 20th of October, 1998 for the PlayStation 1. Thank you for listening, and we really hope you enjoy the show. As I mentioned earlier, probably in the introduction, I'm going to be talking about Xenogears, and I'm going to be talking about it by myself because it's unfair to make Sam try to slog his way through a 60-hour-long RPG while trying to complete his job and games for other episodes that he's taken on because I'm not so much available right now. So all in right now. This is actually my second attempt to record this. I do actually have a recording, but I ran it through our quality control man, Alan, and he came back with some pretty good feedback. Is that I really kind of sounded like I was reading a Wikipedia page. My brother has made mention of that before, so I'm now attempting to use more point forms and go off of my own memory as opposed to reading the long form points I used to use and end up sounding like I'm doing a book report. A C- book report at best. So some of the stuff I want to go over about this is going to be a little bit more serious though still, and so I can't just say this is going to be all like, my happy go lucky attitude on the game, but there is some religious themes, religious links in this game, so I just want to bring that up right off the bat and just mention how the game borrows from religion, doesn't exactly like attack any religions, but it borrows from a lot of religions: Christianity, Gnosticism, Judaism, Buddhism, and Nietzschean philosophy as well. The God is dead principle of Friedrich Nietzsche. So in the game, there's a lot of links. Really well done, really well respected. I know in Japanese culture, Christianity and all those type of linked religions don't really, tickle their fancy that much. So they don't think much about this. So there was some stuff changed for localization, but not a whole lot. For instance, for a link to Christianity, the last boss is called Deus, which is the Latin word for God. They do the Holy Trinity in the themes of creation, redemption, and salvation. So that's prevalent inside of the story. There's other things like names like Zohar and Merkaba and Sophia. They're drawn from Jewish mysticism. There's Cain and the Gazelle ministry, again Judaism. Reincarnation and karma, that will eventually come into play in the story. And of course Nirvana, the ultimate goal of liberation from suffering. It's reflected in some of the characters in their quests. And again, like I said, Nietzschean philosophy, God is dead. And there's some other symbolism in the game, but I didn't really get too deep into the weeds on this one. I just kind of picked what was kind of on the surface and didn't really think too deep into it. So some stuff about this game, moving on from the heavy stuff, just a little bit of an overview of the game style. This game is an early PlayStation 1 game, so the 3D is still kind of touch and go. This is the era where games were still figuring out how to make 3D look really good. And normally it would be with big blocky characters. And in this case, the gears, the robots that you pilot, they are done in 3D and they're big and blocky. And some of them are bigger and blockier than others. But they don't have a ton of motion. So you don't really see them running. They'll actually get up and they'll fly, or they'll roll along, so that they didn't have to make a running animation. And the walking one is just kind of short steps. So definitely some tricks there to get away from having to animate too much in 3D, but it still looks pretty good, so they get away with it. The game itself is done in a 3D perspective, so you do have a 360 degree camera rotation, but the texture maps on everything in the environment are 2D texture maps, and they look very obviously painted on. Not to the point where it ruins the game, it's just obviously compared to today's games, it does not look as good or as crisp, especially if you use a more modern TV, because CRT TVs and this style of graphics are designed for each other. I guess the raster lines kind of created that merging of the pixels to make them a little more smooth. If you ever looked online of an old Super Nintendo game or an early PlayStation game done on a CRT TV versus an HD TV that we use today, you'll notice a huge difference. And that also is a bit noticeable in the sprites of the characters themselves, because your human characters, or your, I guess, humanish or living characters, they're all 2D sprites, and it's very obvious when you rotate the camera and the sprite jumps to the next one to create that pseudo 3D rotation around them. It's one of those things you lived with back in the day. It's nothing that ever ruins a game. It's just, it's noticeable. If you have a hard time playing games that are dated in their graphics, and this might be something you want to avoid, because it really looks that way. What else? Oh, there is cutscenes in this game as well. I'm just going to bring this up really quickly. There's a big cutscene at the beginning of the game that sets everything up. And usually they're just really quick, maybe 30 seconds maximum cutscenes that just kind of do something I don't think they were able to do with the 2D sprites alone. Very rarely is there actual voice acting. It's there, but I kept forgetting about them until they happened. The only one I can think of really is when Faye has his inner turmoil. They use the 3D cutscene to kind of display what's going on. So that's it. That's pretty much the gameplay. I'm going to go over the synopsis of the story. I don't want to get too deep into the story, because every time I try to compress the story down, I end up trying to go beat by beat by beat by beat. So I'm going to give a summary of the entire story. And that is, okay, here's my best attempt at a summary. My third attempt, to be honest, to summarize this in under 15 minutes. I failed so far, but let's go. So you start out with a big cutscene of a ship called the Eldritch flying through space, and it blows up. It's a long cutscene, but it blows up. Everybody gets to escape pods. I don't think anybody really lives, but they might have. I can't really remember through the theme of the story if people did, and that's what kind of seeded the planet they crashed on for humanity. So anyways, the ship crashes on the planet. Spoiler alert, this is the first 5 minutes of the game. And you see it. The last scene you see before the game takes off is the Eldritch burning in the ocean and this lone woman standing there. And that plays later into the story. But you take control of Faye, who is an orphan who was dropped off at the doorstep of the mayor of Lahan village. He has 3 friends, Timothy, Dan, and Alice. Timothy and Alice are getting married. Dan is Alice's brother. He turns out to be a dickhead throughout the game until he, pretends he was just doing it because. But fuck Dan. That's all I'm going to say about him. He starts as a dickhead. He ends as a dickhead. Fun fact, off topic, there is an Easter egg in Lahan village. If you do start this game, you can find Luca from Chrono Trigger. She's in the corner and she gives you a piece of advice. But anyways, so Faye ends up going to visit his mentor, Seitan, who's a scientist who lives up in the mountains. 2 armies come and they attack Lahan. Well, they don't attack Lahan. They're attacking each other. They're in a battle. And it ends up landing in the middle of this little village. Faye takes control of one of the gears to try to save people. He ends up killing everybody through a series of events, which sets off the story. So Faye doesn't want to fight. He's a pacifist to begin with. So he ends up getting kicked out of the village because of this incident. And that's where he ends up going away. And he ends up in the desert where he meets up with the Bart, a rebel leader who turns out to be the king of Ave, one of the 2 warring countries that were part of that whole Lahan village thing. Now, Bart has been ousted by somebody from the Ethos religion, and that person has taken control of his kingdom. So Bart's goal is to get his kingdom back. So Faye joins up with him. Bart is also very protective of another religious sect called Nissen sect, where he has his... I'm not sure if it's his sister or... I doubt it's his sister because they're set to be wed, so it can't be his sister because that would be friggin' gross, and no religion would ever do that. Anyways, so that all happens. Then they decide to have this thing where they're going to protect Eve from Kislev. Kislev decides to attack. Faye gets caught. After again another series of events happens. And this is where the story starts picking up, because from here you start learning about things, the floating city where they just float around the ocean trying to salvage all this stuff. Chevet, which is, I guess, friendly. If you go through the course of the story, Chevet is like the friendly floating city, as opposed to Solaris, which is the evil one, which is trying to control the planet. You meet some characters throughout the game who become your rivals, self-appointed rivals, and they set things in motion and blow stuff up. Basically, what people do is they betray each other and then they try to take over land for themselves and stuff like that. And you meet some insidious people there. So Faye's one-sided rival is Ramses, who's a guy you meet on early in the game, gets beaten by Faye, but he believes he is the reincarnation of, I guess, who Faye is actually the reincarnation of. And he just goes absolute batshit crazy because he's supposed to be the perfect human being. And he just keeps getting his ass handed to him by Faye time and time again. So he keeps trying to get better and better weapons to beat Faye, but Faye just keeps kicking his ass. Solaris is led by Emperor Cain. He's been using one character as a secret agent to watch Faye. I'm not going to tell you which character that is. It's revealed pretty early on in the game, so if you play it, you'll figure it out pretty quickly. And then there's another organization called the Gazelle Ministry, which is these two guys trapped inside of a computer, and they're trying to control the world from the background. They're trying to manipulate everything, but in the end, they get manipulated themselves, because this game is full of twists and turns. And then once that all comes to a head, you reveal that the real person who was controlling everything from the background and his entire plan was to basically become one with God, or the nirvana aspect, I guess, of this game, and that is that person's ultimate goal. So then you find out all the connecting information about why Faye is connected to certain characters and why these characters need him to die. So long story short, because again I'm not going to get into the all of this story, you end up beating God, and that's it. The game ends. But the whole overarching theme of this game is, well, first off, it is about killing God. Let's get that right off the table right now. But it's about the redemption of humanity. So, God isn't actually God, he's a machine. He's a machine that crashed the Eldritch. This is not that important to the story. This is something that's revealed late in the game, but you've already figured it out by this point because it is just way too obvious. But anyways, the end of the game just talks about basically putting everything right so that humanity can exist without something controlling them from the background. So that's the overarching theme of the game. Inside of Faye, throughout the game, in case you haven't noticed, there's going to be some spoilers in this. I don't know how to get around this without the spoilers, but if you don't like it, sorry, I can't think of another way. But let's talk about Faye, and inside of him he has something called id. That's what everybody calls him. And id is based off the Freud model of ego, superego, and id is the unconscious. So every time Faye goes unconscious, when the id takes over, the id does a whole bunch of damage and is super powerful. He is the cause of the destruction of Lahan. He is the cause of destruction later in the game. And it's not until near halfway through the game that anybody makes the connection. He pilots Faye's gear and turns it into this red ultra gear, I guess you can call it. It's more powerful than anything, and nobody can stop it. Even the strongest of characters you meet throughout the game cannot stop him. It is a very important part of Faye, and then later they come together, as they always do, as he connects his unconscious with his conscious, and he becomes a little more powerful, but never as powerful. The other one I want to mention is Saitan, the first character you meet, the mentor of Faye. this is just a personal opinion on this one. I have no backing evidence for what I'm about to say. It's just I think Satan is kind of an analogy for Satan, because throughout the game he continuously goads Faye into the gear that Faye does not want to get into to fight. And anytime Faye has doubts, Satan is there to basically convince Faye to, do the thing he doesn't want to do. So I think that's just, maybe it's just like a little link, or maybe I'm thinking too deeply into this. I have no idea. That's the story in a nutshell. That's a couple of the characters. I'll get deeper into characters in a minute. But I want to start with the gears. Gears, which were, they say, were inspired by Gundam meets Final Fantasy. You can see it in their design. Very Gundam-esque like gears, but they do have that Final Fantasy flair to them. And you can tell why, because this game was pitched as Final Fantasy VII, and they wanted the Square to go, yeah, that's our game, that's our Final Fantasy VII. Obviously, they didn't. But the main gear you pilot is called Weltall, and that's the one that Faye pilots throughout the entire game. All the way up until a point where it gets, a new coat of paint and a name change, which I'll let you discover that one. So gears are one of two ways you can go into battle. They're large, which is kind of funny because you can get into battle where you actually have tiny characters, and then you use an attack and your gear just like steps on them because that's what it's going to do. Gears they're stronger obviously than a person, but they have limits. They have fuel, so fuel is not rechargeable unless you have an item that will help you recharge, or you can use a recharge function, which is basically a pathetic amount of fuel. It takes you longer to recharge to a usable amount of fuel than it would to die and restart the game. You have a boost option, which will let you, expend fuel, but your turn will come by faster. You have Ether in some characters. Ether is the magic of this game, and in this case, Ether is used by a handful of characters. Everybody else has kind of abilities, but it's all called Ether in the end of it. Then every gear has its own equipment. So when you get to the Yggdrasil, which is Bart's ship, you can go repair your gear. You can upgrade your gears, different items and equipment, or you can do this at several locations throughout the game. So the equipment you can get on it is new engines, which gives you more power, larger fuel tanks, which gives you obviously more capacity, and also sometimes you'll find fuel tanks that give you more oomph but have less fuel, so they'll give you more attack, but you'll have a noticeably lower amount of fuel. Frames, which will give you increase in your defense, and then you have a bunch of items that'll enhance your armor, enhance your other armor, give you the ability to heal 10, 30, 50, 70, and I think you can find one that'll let you heal 90% at the expense of your fuel, and it takes a lot of fuel. You got to use these sparingly. Late in the game, you'll find one that gives you a good amount of recharge of your fuel, which becomes really handy because you end up in some pretty beefy fights. The gear battles themselves, you attack like you normally would. You get 3 options for attack. You get light, medium, and heavy attack. Each attack, light is 10 fuel, medium is 20, heavy is 30. If you have death blows, which I'll get into in a minute, unlocked, it'll after you do initial attack, you'll get what's called a level up, and you can go up to 3 levels, and this will let you use a level 1 a weak attack, level 2 a medium attack, level 3 a strong attack with a secondary attack to give you more power to it. So these are based off of your death blows, which you have for your character. So if you don't use a character and you don't get their death blows, then your gears become just as basically just as useless as a character without death blow. Other than that, not much different from the person fight, which I'm going to get into now, because let's talk about the people. So people, they have weapons and items. So they have weapons and armor, which is what gives them power and defense. Not everybody has a weapon though. Like Faye doesn't use weapons. Satan doesn't use weapons. Bart uses whips. Billy uses guns. That kind of thing. So every character, however, does fight the same. I was talking about death blows a second ago. Death blows are basically a combination of buttons, and it can be from, well, 1 point to 7 points worth of button pushes. And of course, triangle is 1, square is 2, and X is 3. But these combos are laid out, and everybody has a similar mapping of combos, so it's not like you have to learn different ones for everybody. But to get these death blows and combos, you have to use them throughout the game. So it's even if you don't get the benefit of the animation of the death blow, the more you use them, the more they power up and eventually unlock, and then you do get the full power of them. And what's really good about this is you have a meter. It's called the AP meter. So you start every round with up to 7 points. I think you start with 4, and as you level up, you get 7 points to spend on attacks. You can do a death blow right away using those 7 points, or you can save them, which will be converted at the end of your turn into AP, and you get up to 26 AP, and then you can use those in what's called a combo. So you just select combo, and you can do death blows, which will each cost a certain amount of AP, and you can do them back to back to back to back. Good strategy in this game is to take one character, just do a weak 1 point attack, and save those 6 other points a few rounds on heavier fights, and then just unleash the beast on the enemy, usually a boss at this point. And you can well, you don't save AP if you use magic or other, so you got to use at least 1 point of attack. So you can save 6 attack per round maximum. Let's see. Yeah, leveling up your death blows, like I said, levels up your gears death blows. The battles themselves aren't too bad. There was no battle that really frustrated me. There was a couple of times where I had to tinker with my equipment and stuff like that to get the proper combination of items onto me so that I wouldn't die so quick. There was one underwater battle, probably about 20 hours into the game, so about 10% through the entire story. And the character underneath the water used a specific other type of attack, and he used it a lot. And I died like 4 times in a row, but I figured I'm going to push through this. So I ended up figuring out I actually had the item that would reduce that amount of damage by 50%, but I had 2 of them. And I didn't know this at the time, but you can actually stack. So if you have 2 items that reduce damage by 50%, well, that's going to reduce damage by 100%. And I put those on, and I was basically an invincible floating fortress underwater, kicking the crap out of this guy while my other 2 people just died like in 2 turns. It's very important to equip your characters right and pay attention to what's going on. After that, I pulled out the player's guide, and I made sure I was ready for every fight. So, yeah, a little bit of cheese in the game, but you know what? It's what you got to do sometimes. What else to say about people? Yeah, they have a stock of standard items for an RPG. You have healing items, you have magic healing items, or again, other healing items. You have items that heal your status. You have items that will use attacks like fire and all that kind of stuff. Nothing special about this game. It does what it does well enough. Yeah, that's everything about characters and battles. Some of the game quirks I'm going to get into. God, what's like some of the things that just I'm not going to say piss me off, but just this game just confused me a little bit. Like one of them is you get this on this vehicle, and it's called the Yggdrasil, and eventually you get to take control of it, and it starts out as this sand submarine, which you know is a thing because submarines are notorious for their ability to go through deserts. Halfway through the game, when it's needed, all of a sudden it's a new ship, but this sand submarine, which crashes and gets destroyed, and they just happen to find its replacement from, Bart's father. It's a water submarine, like, I guess a normal submarine would be the word I'm using, but it still goes through sand because why not? Then later in the game, again, when it becomes important, all of a sudden they've upgraded it to an air submarine. So now it's going submarining through the air, so that becomes your final airship. But I don't know, I kind of wish you found new vehicles as opposed to the same vehicle that just conveniently changes as it's needed. But that's just a me thing. All in all, didn't change the experience of the game. One that did get me, though, one of the two big ones I'm going to talk about. In Kislev, you are arrested and you become a prisoner, and they put a collar on your neck. And that's one of those famous exploding collars. But you have to fight a tournament, and when you win the tournament, they take the collar off and become called the champion. So you're obviously going up against a champion who turns out to be one of your party allies a little bit later on. And the fights in these gear battles, which you get your, of course, well-tall gear again, they changed up the formula. Like, now it's an action battle as opposed to a turn-based battle. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because they didn't use it enough in the game. It might have actually been an interesting way to do combat, is you fight in this 3D arena, you control your gear and you fly all over the screen everywhere you want. You can shoot other attacks, you can punch, you can kick, you can block. It's not very responsive. The hitboxes are atrocious. It's hard to win the later battles because of basically you're trying to punch and kick and the guy just happens to dodge out of the way. It's frustrating, very frustrating. And you have a heat sink. If it overheats, you can't use your other attacks anymore, and you're basically a sitting duck. So you got to win a lot of rounds, and usually it's 3 fights per round in order to go up against the champ. And once you beat the champ, you're able to get your collar off, and that progresses the story. Then you never see this mechanic again. It feels like it was put in here just because they had an intern who needed something to do. It doesn't work. I didn't like it. I slogged through that part, playing 1 fight a day, which kind of slowed down my progress on the game. But yeah, if I had an option to do it again, I wouldn't. That's how much it just didn't work with the game. Second part that irked me. Okay, this game has jumping. So when you're going through the maps, you can jump up to the next level. It's a pseudo-platforming mechanic. And it works in areas where your fall is usually just 1 level. But you get to this point and you get to the Tower of Babel. And you have to climb up it. And the first thing is you don't start on the bottom of the tower. You start about 1 or 2 floors up. And there's only these narrow platforms you can get on. And they try to do platforming through this with this janky camera. And you're jumping up to these next levels. And you miss it by like just a little bit. And your gear will slide and you'll fall all the way to the bottom. Then you got to climb up 2 floors just to get back to where you were. At this point, it's more worth going back to your ship, healing your gear, and going back and attempting to climb again. Because you have to fight through all these enemies as you do this. So it doesn't last long, this first section, but there's this one part where you have to run up a pole or a post. As soon as you hit the joint in it, it falls. And if you don't jump at the right time, you fall with it. I spent way too many times trying to jump at the right time, and when I finally got up there, my God, I did not fucking quit that game. I did everything to make it to the next save point. I didn't care if like half my party was dead. I was not giving up to do that again. And I didn't have to. But throughout the Tower of Babel, it keeps doing things like that. You have these jumps you have to do that are awkward. And it's just, if you're not a platformer, don't try to incorporate high-level platforming elements into your game. But again, this was the last part that actually did anything of this nature at this scope. So, two things, each a one-off, each frustrating and annoying, trying to do something the game really wasn't, and it didn't work either time. Now, the Babel part, not as bad as the Kislev Battle Arena fighting. And only because you do platforming through the game, so you do have time to figure out the jumping mechanic and stuff like that. And some of the jumps, yes, they were my fault, but I'm going to blame the controller anyways, because that's what we do as gamers. So yeah, that is the quirks of the games I've found. Before I get into the music, just go over some facts I found about the game, like a quick overview. About Xenogears itself, this was supposedly the 5th game in a Xenogears series, a Xenosaga, if you will. Rumored, I couldn't find anything to confirm this, but Xenosaga was actually like a reimagining or reboot of this series, starting at episode 1, where the plan was when they got to episode 5, they would remake Xenogears properly. And I'll tell you why it wasn't done properly here in a second. Xenosaga Episode 3 met below sales target, so the series didn't carry on. I mentioned a couple of times this was a concept for Final Fantasy VII. And the studio who made this, Monolith Studios, they just weren't happy with Squaresoft at the end of this, and they broke off and made their own studio, where they made the Xenosaga games, and of course now they work for Nintendo making Xenoblade games. This was a long story ranging about 50 hours for the first disc and another 10 for the second disc, and the religious themes are prevalent throughout the entire game. Now, why did I say Monolith kind of wasn't happy with Square? And that would be because they got rushed and their budget was not sufficient for them to finish this game. So after 50 hours of playing this game, you get into disc 2. And, you know, normally the second or third disc or the final disc of a game is noticeably smaller, but it lets you explore the entire world off the get-go, because by this point you've gotten pretty much everything, and the third disc or the second disc has to have all this information. So you're going to get a shorter story, a lot less stuff added to it, but you're going to have a lot more of the world open. And in disc 2, you have the whole world open to you eventually. But the game halts its pacing at the beginning of disc 2. And it's because they had to rush it out. So at the end of disc 1, I can't even remember what happened. Something huge happens at the end of disc 1. And then it's just like, hey, insert disc 2. And you start off and Faye's sitting in a chair with this big pendant, like necklace that's been talked about throughout the game, swinging in the background. And he's explaining the story, what's going on, what you did, how you got there, all this stuff. And it's a great way to kind of summarize into the second disc. But the problem is, they're explaining all the stuff you would normally do on your journey to get to the next boss. You just get dropped into a dungeon and it's like a 10-minute dungeon. You do that, you fight the boss, and you're back, and then another character's explaining the story from their perspective. Same background, same thing happens, repeat this cycle. You get dropped in a dungeon, fight a boss. At some points, you just get dropped in and fight the boss. You don't even have a dungeon. And then you finally get to the finality of the whole thing, and they're like, all right, now you can explore the world. Here's your air submarine, the Yggdrasil. Go fly around and find some stuff. You can go revisit all the places you've been to. You can find some side quests at this point. There's like 2 or 3 of them, so not a whole hell of a lot, but they give you some good gear. But in the end of it, you're just going to go fight the main boss, and you do that, and it's actually okay. So the final level is actually really well done. Challenging enough that you have to manage your gears, but at the same time, right before you get to the end boss, you have a chance to heal everybody and do a final upgrade. And of course, the final upgrade costs an arm and a leg. So if you don't do it early on or do a little bit of grinding, you're just going to be I guess, fighting with what you got. And you get to use all your characters, so it's kind of nice. So you really do have to upgrade everybody. But the whole of Disc 2 is 10 hours long. It took me 10 hours, sorry. After 50 hours of Disc 1, it feels like a slap in the face. It feels like they really should have been allowed to put in more exploration and less just sitting there telling me the story. Let me fly from point A to point B. Let me interact with characters. All that good stuff. It was just not a great way to end what was otherwise a great game. So, finally, I'm just going to talk about... I'm going to get into the music, and then I'm just going to wrap up with a quick summary of some of the characters in the game. I know I should have done that earlier, but I put it at the bottom of my notes. Nah, rookie move, but like I said, I am a rookie when it comes to doing these solo. I am no Alan. I am no Sam. I am only a Brian. So the music was done by Yasunori Masuda. You might recognize him from Chrono Trigger. This guy has a bad habit of getting sick while building soundtracks, but he did a fantastic job once again. The guy has made his reputation based off of, Chrono Trigger, and he's kept that reputation going. The music is very smooth during the exploration of the game. It gets tense inside of the caves and during exploration. The battle music, especially the boss battle music, is really... not anxiety-inducing. Energetic is the word I'm looking for. It's very energetic, and it gives you that sense of, heightened tension. I wouldn't call this Mr. Masuda's best soundtrack, but goddamn, it's good. I really, really enjoy this soundtrack. It's one of the shining points of the game. But that's about it for most of the game. I'm just going to give a quick character overview of some of the characters. I'm going to wrap up my thoughts and put this one to bed. Send it to Alan. See if he thinks I did any better. And if it's worthy to be a solo episode. If not, I think I might just give up on trying to do a solo episode on this game and maybe pick one that's a little bit easier. So, characters in this game. Like I said, you have your main protagonist, Fei Fong Wong, orphan, dropped off at a village. He basically is guided unknowingly into the path he takes, but he's also doing it based on sort of a destiny as well. He runs into a character named Ellie Van Houten, who turns out to be a Solarian, who believe that the people on the planet are sheep while they are the shepherds. So they look down on the land dwellers, as they call them, but Ellie is a little bit different. She has empathy for them, and she ends up joining your side eventually in the game. You have Saitan Uzuki, who is the mentor and a scientist who lives up on the mountain outside of Lahan Village. He has some hidden paths that you learn about through the game. He ends up being a guide and the mentor to Faye and the party there. He's also the one that kind of pushes Faye into the direction he's going. As I mentioned earlier, you run into Bart Fatima, who is the rightful heir to Ave's throne, he has been deposed by Shaq Khan, who is a puppet ruler for the Ethos religion. Billy Lee Black, who is a priest of the Ethos religion and a gunslinger and the most annoying character, but the most useful character at the same time. He was orphaned as a kid by his father, Jesse, another Solarian, who is attempting to bring down the Ethos religion from the outside. Him and Billy don't get along. Billy eventually reconciles. Bingo, bango, father and son are back together again. Billy uses guns, which require ammunition, which you can run out of. He's the only character in the game that you can actually run out of his attack ability. He does have an ether gun, which is unlimited attack, but some enemies get healed by it, which makes it absolutely friggin' useless in most cases. However, he is a healer as well, and he also has this one spell that speeds up characters, so it's kind of nice to be able to, like, when you make your party, and I use Saitan and Faye all the time, because they are the strongest, and I would use Billy to just speed them up, and those two would just wreck enemies, just left, right, and center, so Billy became pretty useful. Then you have Ricardo Banderas. He is the champion of the Kislev arena. He's the guy you have to beat in order to get your freedom. He's a demi-human, and he turns out to be the son of the ruler of Kislev, and who threw him away because he was an illegitimate child. You have Maria Balthazar, who is a daughter of a Solaris scientist who defected over to the Shavat with a gear. The Solaris scientist is trying to combine the human mind with gears themselves, and turns out that he combined himself with Maria's gear, and that's why if you ever watch the animation, Maria doesn't actually go inside of her gear and is the only one. Now, the dumb character you get, and the character that, like I said, every RPG has that one character you hate, and this one is Choo Choo. Choo Choo can grow in size and doesn't actually have a gear. She's the only character that can heal themselves using items as a gear size thing. Useful for certain situations, but the most annoying character. Says Chew, and replace some many words. How are Chew today? Hate her. Fucking hate her. Never used her, except for the one time I had to. You have Id, which is the inner turmoil of Faye. Not going to get too big into that one. It's just simply the bad voices inside of his head. You have Krelian, who is the Solaris scientist. He is the one who does the bidding of the Gazelle Ministry and Emperor Cain. He's also the one who goads Ramses into fighting Faye all the time. You have Emperor Cain, who is the leader of Solaris, and he is considered a key figure in humanity's creation. He's considered one of the earliest humans. And of course, the Gazelle Ministry, two humans, formerly humans, now a giant robotic machine, trying to revive themselves in order to make themselves one with God, but they get betrayed, as always. So those are just some of the main characters to look forward to when you play Xenogears, a game I highly recommend you give a shot. It is definitely worth the price of admission. You can get it on the PlayStation 3 or the Vita, I believe still if you do the roundabout way on the store. I played it on the PlayStation 3. I bought it a long time ago, but I still have the original disc sitting in my collection. To summarize this game, as my throat dries out and I'm trying to avoid coughing. So if you hear mic cuts, that's just me pausing for a second to cough. But Xenogears, it is a great story. It is a fantastically poorly paced, really good story that keeps you hooked. There is a lot of challenge to this game. It is not the easiest RPG in the world. There is moments where you'll find yourself severely under-leveled and not a lot of places to go level up. Happened to me in Shavat. I ended up having to spend about 3 hours just grinding to get through the next part of the game. But there was only one part to do the grinding in, and that's where I was dying all the time. Once I got through it, though, the rest is pretty much on autopilot. Music in this game is fantastic. The graphics for 1998, 1999 are outstanding. Squaresoft has done it again through Monolith. The gear battles and the death blows make a really interesting turn-based combat mechanic. The combo system is actually fun and actually the highlight of the battle system, separating it from other type of RPGs of the era. Overall, I'm going to give this game a good solid 7.5 out of 10. It is a quintessential RPG. It has a lot of history. It's got a cult following of people who just absolutely adore this game. I'm one of them. I love this game as much as I probably will never play it again because I can't be bothered slogging through another 60-hour playthrough of this game. It was fun to do it once, maybe twice in my life, which is what I've done now. But yeah, as the older I get, the less time I have. So that's kind of where it's losing a little. Is disc 2 especially, it makes it lose a bunch of points. It is very boring, but by that point you're so invested you just push through it. So they got you there. The characters are interesting, the music's fantastic, the gameplay is pretty good, and the story is okay. So that's it, 7.5 out of 10. Thank you for listening to my first solo episode. I really appreciate it. I hope I did a lot better this time. Like I said earlier, I'm going to send this off to Alan and see what he thinks. And Alan, if you're listening to this, I love you, man. But for now, that's it for me. That's it for Retrotopia. If you want to join in on the fun, as we said at the beginning of the episode, you can find us at patreon.com/Retrotopia, where you can comment to the host of the show. Write comments about the game of the week. Wow, I forgot that really quick. And you can join in on polls, which we have on running as I record this. I don't know when this is coming out, so maybe you'll be on the next poll. I have no idea. You can also hear other shows, Quick Play and Retro Bites. Quick Play being a short review by one of us, and Retro Bites being where the three of us get together and just kind of shoot the shit about games and life. So that's it. That's everything. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep your arms and feet inside the gear at all times.